All right. Hey, everybody. It's Colin Kuhn, the Nymphing Fisher. We've got a great show for you tonight. I got to tell you, I'm really excited because we're going to be talking about one of my favorite places to go for lake fishing for trout, and that's the Parklands of Western Manitoba. And who better to join me to talk about this than Phil Rowley, one of the gurus of Stillwater. And let me bring him into the studio here. Hey, Phil.
Hey, Colin. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you for taking the Boston Bruin hat off. I appreciate that.
No problem. I'll send you pictures later.
Okay, I know it's going to be tough for me with my hockey team this year. So, Phil, I've been going to the Parklands since 2003 when I first started the New Fly Fisher, and I got invited out there because they were doing a big tournament, and that's when I started to learn about all these lakes that were being stocked with rainbow trout, brown trout, tiger trout, brook trout in some places.
Mm-hmm.
But the cool thing was, and the thing I really liked about it, is that it's very accessible and very affordable. And you're going to catch fish like this. I mean, there's a lot of trophy fish here, and it's a very inexpensive place to go and trout fish. So why don't you tell me about how long you've been going there and some of your experience?
I've been in a similar time. And I remember being actually in the fly fishing retailer show in Denver, and Bob Sheedy had a booth. He was doing a lot of work trying to promote the region. And I was with our mutual friend, Mr. Chan, another Stillwater nut. And he kept showing us these pictures of these huge browns and tigers and rainbows. And we were like, where is that? So I finally got to get out there. And you're right. It's, it's a pretty special place. It's those lakes all specifically groomed for their ability to grow big trout. I remember when they were first setting those lakes up, the partnership that they had set up between was Flipper back then to do an inventory of the lakes and then work with the province to stock them, and they just flourished. It was just amazing, and for me, it was arguably the best Stillwater trout fishing I experienced in North America. And I realize that's a subjective statement, but from my perspective, from the diversity of the species, as you mentioned, there was browns, rainbows, tigers. The average size was impressive, to say the least, and really the not too many people knew about it. So it was pretty remote, and you could often have a lake to yourself or with minimal other anglers there with you, which was kind of a catch-22 because we all enjoy that, but we know this region needed to make sure the world knew about it. So because of the municipalities got involved, and they helped pay for the aeration on these lakes, which was so critical to them surviving through that nasty prairie winter.
Absolutely. And I've just been putting up some pictures that are yours or mine from over the years, and look at the colors on this brown trout.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a September, early October brown trout, one of the lakes. Here's a shot of me with a fat rainbow trout on that, and that's West Goose.
Yep.
And you can see I'm in a pontoon boat there. Here's another shot from Patterson Lake where I was just at the edge of dark fishing for big browns. And that literally, again, in my pontoon boat, was literally, 50 to 100 feet from the dock where you launch.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the public access there. So, I mean, it's an incredible fishery. It's not that well known. I think it was really well known back in the early 2000s. It kind of.
Yeah, we started filming some shows out there and really,
Yeah.
And
Fly Fisherman did an article. But you're right. The shows had a huge impact. Our friend Ken Kansas, who was one of the biologists that really got the whole thing started, he was involved in being in some of the shows and talked about the program and how they tested the lakes. And for people who don't know, like you mentioned, Phil, like it's so cold there, you have to aerate the lakes at night or during the winter.
Yeah,
not all of it, because if they don't, the ice is so thick, it's like 5 feet thick.
Well, and the lake becomes stratified, and because they're so productive, once the snow gets on, sunlight penetration stops, no photosynthesis, plants start to die, start sucking up oxygen, and that's typical of a very productive lake. That weeds and habitat like that is just food factory for them, but it just consumes the oxygen, and the trout being the largest oxygen consumers pay the price. So without a little assistance through aeration programs, none of those lakes would survive. And so that gives that nice stable environment for those trout to flourish and grow, as you've shown in those pictures.
So what I'm going to do right now for everyone that's watching is we're going to play a video. You did this a number of years ago with the Russell Inn, which is
Yep.
in Russell, kind of like at the center.
The epicenter of it, and they understand the whole program, right? You go in their restaurant, we've both been there. There's fly plaques on the wall, and you say you're a fly fisher, they know what you're there for, which is really really nice and really reassuring. I used to do schools out of there many years, so it's a great place to base yourself out. It's got everything you need, as we'll see.
Okay, well, let's put this video up, and then we'll come back and do some more talking about this location and why it's so good.
The Parklands region in southwest Manitoba offers some of, if not the best, public stillwater trout fishing in North America. Centrally located within this stillwater paradise lies your destination hub, the Russell Inn. The Russell Inn offers wonderful accommodation, a restaurant, pub, gas bar, convenience store, coffee shop, sandwich bar, license sales, everything you need for that trip of a lifetime. Join me as I take you on a virtual tour of the wonderful lakes located within this region.
After a quick right turn out of the Russell Inn, turn right onto Highway 83 North. A short 25-minute drive later finds you looking out onto West Goose Lake. West Goose features a large parking area and boat launch. This lake is home to a healthy population of brown and rainbow trout, with many well in excess of 20 inches. From the Russell Inn, turn right onto Highway 83 North. Approximately 1 hour later, take a slight right onto Tees Lake Road. Twin Lake, Purse Lake, and Tees Lake are in close proximity to each other off the Tees Lake Road. Twin Lake is home to one of the Parklands' primary attractions, the beautiful and aggressive tiger trout. Twin features a large parking area, washroom facilities, dock, and boat launch. Purse Lake is a short, less than 5-minute drive from nearby Twin Lake and is home to a solid population of brown and brook trout. Purse Lake features a large parking lot, excellent launch facility, and washroom. Located across the road from Purse Lake lies Tees Lake, the newest lake within the Parklands stable of lakes. After making a short left turn after leaving the Russell Inn, take Highway 45 east. Approximately 1 hour later, turn left at the junction of Highway 21 and 45. This road soon turns into a good gravel road. A short drive later, Patterson Lake appears on your left. Patterson Lake is arguably the crown jewel of the Parklands region and is home to a trophy population of brown and rainbow trout. Patterson offers ample parking, excellent launch facilities, washrooms, and a small campground featuring pull-through sites complete with electrical outlets. Located less than 10 minutes to the east of Patterson Lake lies Tecarik Lake. Like nearby Patterson, Tecarik Lake offers good parking, washrooms, and an excellent boat launch. Tecarik is home to both brown and rainbow trout and has the ability to produce some true trophies. After driving approximately 1 hour east of the Russell Inn down Highway 45, turn left at the small town of Sandy Lake. After passing through Sandy Lake, take Provincial Road 250 north. Follow 250 north for 7 miles or 11 kilometers and turn left onto Road 470. After driving approximately 1 mile, keep an eye out to your left for the sign identifying Corsdefine Lake. Turn left at the sign and Corsdefine Lake appears on your right. Corsdefine is a rich, productive lake capable of producing trophy trout. Corsdefine features a good parking area, washroom, and a good boat launch. Approximately 1 hour east of the Russell Inn along Highway 45, you come to the junction of Provincial Road 250. Turn right onto Provincial Road 250 and approximately 1 mile later, Pybus Lake appears on your left. Pybus offers a large parking area, washroom, and good launch facilities. Pybus is home to tiger trout and trophy-sized rainbows, some of the largest in the Parklands region.
So there you have it. Your destination hub for the Stillwater Paradise is the Russell Inn. So the next time you're looking for that Stillwater adventure, give them a call or look them up online.
My goodness, Phil, you got a velvety voice.
I have a face for radio, right?
Exactly. For everyone that's asked some questions, we're going to get to them in just a second.
Yeah.
I just want to quickly say something about what we saw. There's actually more lakes than that are stocked. There's more up in the Duck Mountains, which are farther north of Roblin. And as well, in Russell, there's a lake that had a problem with walleye that was stuck and now is back. And that Spear Lake, which is literally 5 minutes from the Russell Inn, it's right there.
If that, yeah, it's Go up the road maybe a mile and hang a left. Big sign there, Spear Lake Road.
So the big attraction, and for our American friends that are watching this, it's just not Canadians that are coming there. We had people from North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, even as far away as California. I remember meeting
Montana. I had guests on my schools, Texas. The word got out, California for sure. And the other good thing is good old Canadian dollar too, right? So it makes it even more affordable.
Yes. And that's one of the things, everyone, we're going to talk about is what it costs to come to this region and what you need to bring, the flies, the rods, talk about boats, all those things. But the key, and you said it repeatedly about all those lakes, there's access. It's all public.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them have got bathrooms, which is a big deal. Yep. And it's such an affordable area to go fish and catch trophy trout.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's that was one of the, in addition to the investment they did in the fisheries and stocking them and picking the right lakes for the right reasons. Once they picked those lakes and the municipalities got involved, helped paying for that aeration, which I mentioned, putting parking lots in, launch facilities. So, you pull into some of these lakes, it's pretty, pretty impressive when you expect to see a rustic experience, and it's a nice, hold 20 cars or something in there comfortably, right? So it's all good.
I wanted to jump into the seasons before we got into some of the questions, but Mark's putting the button on us.
Yeah.
And Tom has got a really good question when we were talking about the aeration. Do you want to explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, what they do with lakes, I talked about why they do it. It's because of the phenomenon known as winter kill, where the lake thermally stratifies. And one of the unique properties of water is it won't mix when it's at different temperatures. So left to Mother Nature, a very productive lake, when the ice goes on and that snow cap comes on and the weeds start to decompose and consume oxygen, the fish will suffocate. They'll die under the ice. And to stop that, they put in basically like a bubbler in an aquarium, to keep it really simple. And what this does is it keeps the water circulating throughout the winter, and it'll actually leave an open hole in the ice because of the circulation. And so that anoxic water or low oxygen water gets circulated up to the surface, diffuses with the air, and gets recharged. So the lake is constantly in a well-oxygenated condition, which allows it to get through the winter. Because these lakes are shallow. These, I'm thinking probably, we look at Twin Lake that's famous for its tiger trout. I'm going to say 30 feet deep, but I'm just pulling off the memory banks here, so don't criticize me if I'm 5 or 10 feet out. But they're not very deep at all.
I think most of them are 20 to 30. I think
if that, Patterson's got some 25, 30-foot holes, but not a lot. Most of the lakes, a high percentage of them are less than 15, 10 feet deep and just, food factories. That's why these fish grow so big. They got leeches, they've got chironomids, they got bait fish. Some lakes have scuds. There's a host of things that they can eat on. And I think those bait fish are really important there because that's what helps those browns, tigers, and rainbows really pack on the protein. They seem to like a little sushi in their diet. So,
Don't we all? So Russ asked a question about turnover in the spring and fall and about when the ice comes off. And, before we go to that, let's just talk like the seasons really to go to the Parklands are basically May, June. I mean, if it's an early ice off in April,
yeah,
but typically in this region, which is southwestern Manitoba, you're looking at May, June into early July. But once you get into warm temperatures, you should stop fishing for these for the trout because you can catch them, but you're going to kill them.
Yeah, they're gonna, the water, the oxygen content's low because of as water increases, its ability to hold oxygen decreases. So you can catch these fish, but they have no real way of recovering themselves. They become stressed, acidosis kicks in, and even though that fish may swim off, it just can't get its body back into balance and get stressed, and it can die. So, yeah, and then you mentioned the fall. It's probably, I'd say mid-September is good on until, well, how much cold can you stand? You and I have been out there some days when it's been pretty cold, but fishing's been very good. So it's all about your pain threshold in the fall.
Yes, and you're the lucky guy with the boat and the heater in it, and I'm out there in a little.
I remember doing an episode out there, and it was, just above 0 centigrade, 32 Fahrenheit. It was blowing. It tends to be a little windy at times out there because it is the prairies. And I remember having every piece of clothing I had on, and when you catch a fish, you got to throw it all off because you want it to look nice and warm. And I had a heater in the boat, so I'd catch a fish, release it, and spend 10 minutes getting my digits back together. But boy, the fishing was good. It was really good.
So let's talk about the turnover, which happens both in the spring and the fall, just like anywhere else.
Yeah, I don't know if it happens quite as with the aeration, because that lake's in constant circulation. It doesn't stratify like a lake that is unaerated, so you don't get that classic turnover that you do in the spring and the fall. You're probably going to get a little bit of turnover, but it's not that significant. I don't recall ever really running into it because when it's a time close to turnover is your thermometer. 39 degrees Fahrenheit, 4 degrees centigrade, that's when water is most dense. That's when turnover is going to occur. So that's, in the fall months, that's quite late into the season that it gets that cold. But they're both, turnover is an important environmental ecological event for any lake because it reoxygenates it and recharges it and gets it, set up for spring in the hatches, or it gets it into winter in the best, most oxygenated state it can. So I wouldn't let that, I've never, in all the years I've been going out there, I've never really had a turnover issue where and typically, for those that aren't familiar, if a lake's in turnover, if it's, lake that's typically clear, it's going to be all murky. There's going to be lots of suspended matter up on the surface. And, the fishing's just off for about 5 to 7 days. And the good thing about lake turnover, as compared to, say, runoff in a river, you can just go to another lake because there's a pretty good chance that lake has yet to turn or has already turned and settled back down again, and the fishing's good. And the Parklands region has those opportunities that you can just, you and I have done it, Colin, where we go, let's go somewhere else today, right? Or go across east-west goose. Let's go across the street and go fish east goose, right? So you can do that.
That's the beauty of the area, and there's so many other lakes that are nearby to one another, usually within half an hour. You can jump from lake to lake, sometimes only 5 minutes. Yeah. My experience with the actual turnover of the lakes, I don't ever remember seeing it in the fall.
No.
A bit in the spring where you'll get the sediment and sometimes that's as much the winds you get in the spring.
Yeah, it's more a wind, just that water, like a bathtub. Once it gets going, it just, it's called séché. It just goes back and forth and just churns up everything, right? But I don't think it's water, for me, the water temperature is the key. If it's, if you pull up on the lake and it's all murky and it's 56 degrees, it's not turning over, I don't think. It's because it's just probably had a recent windstorm and churned it all up.
Well, I want to show this picture because I caught this rainbow in 2 feet of water, right where I was standing.
Yeah.
And the water was a little stained. This is in the spring, early spring. You see the trees are just, they still got some of their fall colors in them. But this was actually in the spring. And the rain, this is the cool thing. You get big fish that come into those shallows in the spring.
That's West Goose. And that lake is, uber productive because it's got some of the bit like the Bow River in Calgary is it's got the water treatment that the comes into the lake there by the parking area, and it's just full of nutrients, and so it's just that lake is super productive.
Yeah.
Um, One of my
All
most
right.
memorable chironomid experiences on that lake.
Yes, and that's where you showed me. I think it's called naked.
The naked technique, yes.
That's right. Just a huge, long, 25-foot leader.
Yep.
It's on
Two flies and
just go like this, Colin. Nice and slow,
yeah.
nice and slow, and all of a sudden, I saw that line go. Zoop.
Yeah, it's a bit like the take on a wet if you're swinging wets on a river. That sort of you either see the line move and you set, or you'll just there's a little bit of wind, the line's under tension, and it just feels like a grab on a wet fly, which is a very addictive take.
Okay. Well, Josh has asked a question about indicators, and what I'm going to do, Josh, if you don't mind, I'm going to play a video where you're talking about indicators, Phil. So, and I think everyone would like to see this. So, it's the start of one of our shows. So, we're going to go back about how Russell's the epicenter of this area. But you should know you can also stay in Roblin. There's all types of places. I've got friends who go there in RVs from Alberta and from down south.
Yeah, there's a campground on West Goose, a very nice campground, right?
Exactly. I slept in a tent in the parking lot at Patterson, not recommended, in the gravel.
I still remember that. I didn't do it, everyone. It wasn't me.
Well, that was Ken. But there's cottages to rent in the area, and there's lots of motels in the area to stay at. Very affordable, two people to a room kind of thing. But we'll get into that more. Let's watch this video, and then we'll come back, Phil. And this has got a little bit about indicator fishing, whether it's spring or fall.
Yep.
Today, the new fly fisher is based out of the Russell Inn, located in the Parklands region of southwest Manitoba, amongst arguably some of the finest public stillwater trout fisheries in North America. The shallow, productive lakes nestled within this region have specifically been selected and groomed for their potential to grow healthy trophy trout. The Russell Inn is the stillwater hub of the Parklands region, rich with amenities for the fly fisher, including great food, accommodation, Wi-Fi, convenience store, and gas station. Everything you need is at your feet, enabling you to focus on the fantastic stillwater fly fishing this region has to offer. Strike indicator presentations have evolved into an important stillwater presentation technique, particularly in shallow water 15 feet deep or less. Indicators allow you to control two critical presentation elements: depth and retrieve speed. Depth is governed by the distance set between the strike indicator and flies, so they suspend just above the bottom. Typically 1 to 2 feet depending on the bottom contour and makeup. How little or often you retrieve the line dictates the retrieve speed. On today's show, I'm going to show you some of the strike indicator tricks, techniques, and patterns I like to use when fly fishing lakes. Fish on. Looks like a brown trout. Hard to tell yet. It's fighting like a brown, but it's make sure I distribute that line evenly on the reel. And it's a brown trout. Nice plump brown trout. Look at the shoulders on that thing. Look at the sides on that thing. Look at the shoulders and the belly. I bet you it's been eating a lot of minnows. Wow. Love the Parklands. Make sure it's good and healthy. She's pretty plump. Off she goes. Wow. Repeat as necessary. I'm often asked about indicator size when it comes to fly fishing lakes. And unfortunately, there's no silver bullet. You need a variety on hand, particularly when you're fishing balanced flies.
bounce flies way more than traditional beadhead flies. So larger indicators are needed, or else smaller indicators are just going to simply get pulled under. So again, you need that variety on hand. And since any surface chop on the water, the bigger the wave, the bigger the indicator you're going to need.
Outstanding, Phil, as always. Great information.
Kills me to sit here in winter and watch that. You know that. That's cruel.
So before we talk about the indicator fishing and things like that, I've got to say right off the top, this is probably the biggest legacy I have from you, Phil, is the emails, comments I get on videos, and especially emails. Where can I get those indicators? Because nobody can find them. Where can they get them, Phil?
They can get them from mine and Brian's online Stillwater Fly Fishing Store, stillwaterflyfishingstore.com. So we've got two styles, ball and tapered, and 5 different colors, and you can get them in sorted colors, different sizes. People often ask, probably the mediums and the larges are the size I use the most. So, yeah, we've got them, lots of them. Get them while they're hot.
Now, interesting enough, both Mark and I, who we love going Great Lakes steelhead fishing, where you're basically nymphing with streamers and egg patterns. Those things are awesome. They're awesome. Bigger sizes, and I'll actually put a little black marker on the bottom so I don't spook the fish. But the biggest thing is there you are, and you've got 9 to 12 feet of leader out there to your fly, steelhead fishing, and you pop into a steelhead. That thing slides right down to where the flies are, and I can net the fish easy. It's fantastic. So it's just not for the silver.
You also get a little extra fight, because if you don't have any stopper in the way and it slides right down and hits the fish on the nose, it kind of gets an extra run out of it for you. So you're getting more fish per.
Okay, Phil. Oh my goodness.
I thought you'd like that.
That was shameless. Okay, so if you go into our YouTube channel, for anybody, Tom was just asking, you go into our YouTube channel and put in Parklands in the search, you'll find a whole bunch of shows. And the good news is for everyone that's watching this, Phil, where Manitoba Tourism has announced that they're going to support us, and we're going to come back and do a show, and I'm going with you, unfortunately for you. And you're going to be in the boat. I'm going to be in the little float tube, and we're going to show the different styles, and we're going to do another little tour of the Parklands and show off some the older lakes. And while we're doing this, since we're mentioning this, somebody's asked a question about some of the lakes and how, they heard Carrick wasn't this and Patterson's not that. And one thing I want everyone to know, and John, I'm not an expert on lakes and how they work, but the one thing I have learned from places that are like this, they even have a place in Northern Ontario like this, where they stock lakes, is there's lakes that go through cycles. And they can be really hot. There's lots of fish, lots of food. And then for some mysterious reason, they have lots of reasons, the number of fish, the size of fish, something happens and they're not as good. But that's the beauty of the Parklands. There's so many lakes that, you do a little research and you'll find which ones are fishing well.
Yeah, no, I know John. John's been out there a couple times with me and fish, so he knows the area very well. He ties some beautiful chironomid patterns, Colin. He's somebody you need to look up.
Okay.
Yeah, but I've heard that there was some issues with them, pre-pandemic, but all the feedback we've got now is they're coming back on board. There was some issues with some perch in some of the lakes, and they're managing them and getting them under control. So it looks good. I'm excited to go out there this fall, and it's like visiting an old friend again. I'm sure.
It will be, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And this time, I'm not going to try and choke to death on a piece of pizza at the Russell Inn. So, anyways,
you still bug me that you thought we'd left you to die, and I remember my basic first aid. If you're choking, that's your body getting out. We step in when you turn blue. So
very comforting. Thanks.
We were there for you. You got it out.
Especially as you sat there sipping your drink, laughing. You can. So we'll get into the flies next, but again, I just want to reinforce for everyone. So the ideal seasons, if you want to come to this area, May, June into early July, I'd say, And then September, you were saying, like, I know some
Yeah,
people go there right
mid-September.
after,
Yeah,
like mid-September, first week of September. So what you got to do is find out what the temperatures are. If it's
yeah,
still warm there, if it's still 30 degrees Celsius to 25 degrees
yeah,
Celsius, which is, in the 80s, 70s, that's too warm. You
yeah,
actually, and you mentioned it, like I've fished there when there's snow on the ground from overnight and
yeah,
it's cold and the fishing is red hot.
yeah.
Those fish have got the feed bags on.
Yeah, I call fall the best of times and the worst of times. It's the best of times because fish are in shallow, they're feeding, they're chasing minnows, eating leeches, they're eating anything they come across. Sometimes, I remember seeing a question there about indicator depth. Sometimes in the fall, we're fishing flies 2 feet, a foot and a half below an indicator, right against the cattails and the tules, because those big browns and rainbows are in there chasing minnows. But it's the worst of times because winter's coming and it, right? You're on borrowed time. And, some years we get, Canadian Thanksgiving's typically the second weekend in October. That's usually a good time. And anytime after that, you could be on borrowed time. It could literally go from, a nice warm day, mid 50s, 40s, warm for the fall to like below zero and iced up and you're done, right? That's how fast it can happen some years.
Yeah, just got to pay attention to it. But the thing is, I've typically gone for 7 to 10 days when I go there because you got your travel days, and we'll talk a little bit of how to get there. But
Yeah.
it's not that hard to get to. But I like to have those 2 travel days. It's just like when I go on vacation with my wife, and then I want to have that 6 days of fishing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it's so fantastic. But like anything, you're going to find out what lakes. Hopefully, do a little bit of information. And there's some good sites that are available, Flipper, and some Facebook pages. And a lot of people are talking about how the fishing is in different lakes.
Of course, they can contact us as well. We're only too happy to help.
Exactly. So we'll go to the flies next because I want to keep this moving because it's already 8:30 here. And why don't we talk about the flies, Phil, because that's a real important thing. And then we'll go to the equipment. So let me pull them up here.
Yeah, I sent you a few.
You sent me a few.
But I broke them into categories. And, from the number of years I've spent out there, I spent a lot of times, you're going to, leeches, minnows, chironomids. So we'll start with chironomids here. So that's a pattern of mine. The black Sally, it's just black with red. Black is your most predominant color, so black and red. And we're talking sizes maybe as big as a 10 sometimes, but 12 to 14 would be a good average size for those. On a scud hook or a 2 extra long curved nymph hook would be fine.
And for those that haven't done this, catching, a 25-inch brown trout on a fly that small, I mean, that's quite something.
Yeah, this is your basic, this is a pattern. I didn't name it, but it's called a PBR, fills black and red. And it's just, again, a simple, the white bead works well because it stands out at a distance. Some of the lakes have they're so productive, there's suspended algae in there, which kind of mucks up yarn gills. So a white bead-headed pattern is always good to have on board as well. And a good old chromie, because when the hatch is on, the chironomid pupa become quite shiny because of the gas they use to help elevate themselves up to the surface and emerge. So that when the hatch is on and you got bugs coming off, it's good to have something shiny with silver flashabou like this or anti-static bags, materials like that. And this one is a collaborator. This pattern's over 25 years old and it still produces. It's just got that burnt orange look. And I had a guest with me one time, Colin, on Twin, the tiger trout lake, that caught a tiger that if we'd measured it, properly and stuff, it was a Manitoba record. It was 6 inches over a 24-inch bump board. It was massive and ate a size 14 collaborator.
Unreal.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the meat flies.
The ones you like. Good old woolly buggers, right? In all their variations, a lot of them called specials. There's Tacaric specials. There's black beaver and tan. There's midnight fire. They're all variations of woolly buggers. You can't go wrong on still waters with a woolly bugger.
Yeah, the black beaver and tan is one of my favorites there.
Yeah. This is just a simple mini leech or micro leech. It's a M&M. It's actually ostrich herl over a mirage opal body, so it's got a little bit of sparkle in it. And in the fall months, micro leeches or mini baby leeches are just excellent patterns to work in very shallow water, 5 feet or less. And that's the black beaver and tan. That's ironically, Colin, that this fly not only works in Manitoba. If you recall the show I filmed on Henry's Lake, that's what I got that huge hybrid on. Was a black beaver and tan, just like that. It's a black woolly bugger, basically with brown and black variegated chenille for the body.
What size do you recommend?
Eight. Yeah, you don't need anything big. 8s and 10s. That's all I tend to fish with. And this is you can't go to the Parklands without balanced flies. And this is, if I had to fish with one balanced leech or one balanced fly, it'd be this one, a bruised leech. Just black marabou and black blue Arizona semi-seal. And you can put gold bead, always tungsten, gold bead, chartreuse, kind of a bubblegum pink and hot orange all work well.
This fly, by the way, was my second favorite fly for steelhead in the Great Lakes last fall.
Yeah, and Mr. Flagler was even using it for bass, as I recall, wasn't he?
Yes. Yeah, it was working for bass.
Yeah.
Oh, let me try that one again. There we go. It's the next one.
And that's just the bruised leech again, showing it. One of the things you want to do with I always do with my semi-seal leeches like this is give them a dunk in really almost near boiling water right after you tie them, and that takes all the memory out and just makes them flow and look even more leech-like.
Good thing.
And this is a baby leech in bruised. It's tied on using the new tungsten head turner beads. So you can fish this, cast and retrieve, and it'll dance through the water like a jig. But if you attach jig flies like this using a clinch knot and cinch it just back towards the hook bend a bit, this fly will hang horizontally like a balanced fly. So you get a 2-for-1 out of it. This is on a number 12. So in the fall months and early spring, right after ice off, I like fishing mini leeches or baby leeches like this. And that's another fly, a long proven pattern. It's called Glenn's leech. A friend of mine in British Columbia created this, and it's transported itself all over the world into Manitoba. And that's just a little, originally with rabbit strip tail, but now we use the micro zonkers or the micro pine squirrels, and it's just marabou up the body with a little red cone or a red bead on the front of it. Again, black and red. Good, you can't go wrong with black. It's Henry Ford philosophy on flies. And a gold bead flashback pheasant tail. This fly just, I think a lot of times this is particularly deadly. Colin, you may remember the trip we filmed on Course de Fine. Fish were right in tight on the shallows, and I think they took this as a little immature, a juvenile minnow, juvenile fathead. This fly is just deadly and a great pattern just to hang under an indicator along the banks for shallows. Browns and rainbows love it. And the Prince Nymph. This fly comes into its. I've done well with this fly in the fall months when the trout get on the backswimmers. Early in the falls, these backswimmers can only fly when they're mature. So that typically happens in early spring or late in the fall months. And they'll fly off and mate and migrate. So before the trout really get tuned in to what a backswimmer is and stuff, I've had some good luck fishing that naked technique, fishing Prince Nymphs. And this is a favorite stillwater pattern of mine no matter where I go. It's a Dial Bach. It's a Welsh pattern. It actually means little devil. And you can tie this thing in a myriad of materials, hare's ear dubbing, ice dub, or peacock curl like this. It's super simple. And this peacock version is very good when they're on scuds in like a size 12 or 14 standard hook. And Danny Rickards pattern, good pattern, is Stillwater Nymph, kind of half scud, half damsel, just buggy, suggestive. Great pattern to search and explore with. If you're not sure what they're feeding on, it's just got a very good overall attractive nature to it. And you got to have bait fish. This is a balanced bait fish of mine, a balanced minnow tied in white. It's got some barge slapping as a hackle in front of it, and you want to have bait fish pattern. If you want big browns, especially in the fall, they love to hunt them in the shallows because that's where all the fathead and your brook stickleback, your common minnows there, and they love the shallows and in around the weeds. So this is a fly you want to suspend, like I said earlier, anywhere from 4 feet down in the fall to 1.5 feet below an indicator. It's amazing how shallow they'll chase those bait fish. And if you want to cast and strip, this is Cheech, Clark Pierce's baby fat minnow. Just a fantastic little minnow pattern. That thing just has the translucent, so a great cast and retrieve. And this is probably in a size 10 or an 8 hook, short shanked hook, and it's the overall fly is maybe 1.5 inches long. So small minnows in the Parklands. And don't go anywhere without boatman and backswimmer patterns in the fall. This is a water floatman. It's a boatman imitation, dark back, lighter bellies. It's got the sparkle in there to suggest the bubble of air that the naturals trap along their body. Very fun fishing. Crazy.
I think I got my biggest rainbow on one of these with you on Patterson.
Yeah, when they get on them, it typically happens in the fall. Early afternoon when it's at the warmest, that gets them moving, and all of a sudden it'll be like raindrops everywhere and some of the most aggressive slashes and boils you'll see. And just cast something like this into the boil and just quick, brisk strips, choppy, erratic hand twist, or 2 to 3 inch strips and pauses, and hang on, because they hammer these things when they're on them. And this is a greater water floatman, another pattern of mine that's designed to imitate a backswimmer, which is a larger cousin of the water boatman. You want to handle these bugs with care because they can give you a nasty bite. They are predators, and when they splat down and scoot around, I'm tripping in memory lane right now thinking about. I remember watching a fish on Patterson chase one of these things around. It was like a dog fight, just right beside the boat. The fish didn't care I was there and just chased it down and eventually ate it. So pretty exciting fishing when they're on these.
That's what I recall quite well, is how aggressive the fish were when they're on the boatmen or the back swimmers. They just hammered the flies.
Yeah. But as you see there, it's basically leeches, minnow patterns, some nymphs, boatmen and backswimmers in the fall, and chironomids in the spring. Those lakes, I remember Patterson one time, there was so many chironomids hatching. It was like a brown scum on the surface of all the shucks. You almost thought that the fish wouldn't eat a chironomid, but they do. And they were eating them anywhere from 10 to 12 feet of water right out. We were getting them to 16, 18, 19, 20 feet of water, using a variety of different techniques to fish those waters. Boobies and blobs work. Yeah, I remember that fall show I talked about how cold it was fishing a washing line setup, whereas I had the booby on the point and a leech off a dropper in between. And what this does is allow you to fish a set depth depending on the fly line you choose and keep your flies in that area. And I was using a biscuit colored booby on the point on Tecarik, and those browns love that color and ate it a lot. Tequila. So yeah, I would bring boobies and blobs out there as well. Definitely worth a try. Boobies, blobs, fabs, now apps, worms, which is like it's just super floss everywhere. Two out the front, 2 out the back, 2 out each side. It looks like a spider going through the water when you strip it, but it drives them crazy.
Yeah. Clint made a good point. We're going to go to equipment here in a second, but 2X. This is one of the places where, I won't even use 3X most of the time.
No, I'm using 2X,
1X, and 0X.
0X. Like if it fits through the eye of the hook and you tie a loop knot, you're good, because these fish are not leader shy, and especially when they're chasing minnows or something, they hammer them, right? And if you bring 4X or 5X, you'll be just losing flies every cast, every fish.
Trying a lot.
Yeah.
And something we should mention for those that haven't fished in Manitoba before. This is one of the provinces that has barbless rule, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you see some of these flies, you see a barb, understand it's going to be pinched down. They're very, if a game warden or somebody from the Ministry of Natural Resources comes to see you, you want to make sure all your barbs are pinched down. They have a little test they'll do. They'll take your fly and stick it through a piece of paper, and when it's coming back, if it sticks, you're going to get charged. So just a quick thing about that, it's not a big deal. And a lot of the flies you showed there, like your balanced leeches and stuff like that, I mean, those hooks don't even have barbs.
No, oh, actually, they're crushed down. It's the first thing I do when I put them in, tie on them, is I crush the barb down. So if I do accidentally break or damage a hook, I haven't wasted time tying a fly on it. So, or I give those to you, Colin.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, I'm going to put on a video here, and then we'll come back again and we'll talk about equipment. Okay? Because I think it's time for.
In order to ensure your flies sink straight down beneath the indicator, it is important to have level, thin diameter leader and tippet between your indicator and flies. Flies won't sink straight down if you use a standard tapered leader due to their long, thick butt sections, resulting in differing leader and tippet diameter along its length. In order to accomplish this, it is important to use dedicated nymphing leaders featuring short butt sections or level leaders constructed entirely out of tippet.
Small barrel swivels, size 12, 14, and 16, may not be considered a common component to most stillwater kit bags, but they serve a valuable role. Depending on the color, they can be used as a form of attraction. They help reduce tangles due to the rotating nature of the swivel. They also help quick release indicator peg loss in the event of a break-off, and they help reduce incompatibility issues between softer nylon and stiffer fluorocarbon because the swivel acts as a junction between these two materials. Fish on, fish on. We're in deep water here. We're fishing into 22 feet of water, so that swivel helps get things down. 2 flies on. I'm not sure which one he's taken. The bottom fly is a bloodworm imitation, and the one up above it is a chironomid pupa. These fish are big in here, so I'm going to get this as best I can on the reel while not losing focus on the fish. And I haven't seen it yet. There are some big, beautiful rainbows here in West Goose. And there it goes. Doing my best to keep it out of the anchors here. We're double anchored. And that is a beautiful, healthy rainbow. These West Goose fish, for all this colored water, you'd think would be dark, but they are some of the most brightly colored rainbows you'll have the pleasure to catch on the fly. There we go, she's in the bag. Fly is out. What a beautiful fish. I'm gonna put these fish are big and strong and they can be a little challenging to hold. So I'm just gonna use a soft cotton glove. You know, ideally you'd like, bare wet hands are ideal, but you run the risk of, while you're holding the fish, or perhaps you wanna take a quick picture, you could accidentally drop the fish overboard. It could hit itself on the gunnels, or worse, land in the boat. So it's just I guess you could almost say a lesser of two evils, just to control the fish. We're gonna pick this up, let you have a look at that. What a beautiful fish. Beautiful. This is why the Parklands, just rich with these lakes, specifically chosen for their ability to produce fish like this on a consistent basis. Make sure she's going good. She's fighting me a bit. You can see those gills working. Wants to go. Off she goes into the gloom. Wow. Gotta love the Parkland.
Phil, first thing we should talk about is you using a glove there.
Not anymore.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that was shot in 2010.
That was a long time ago, and I still didn't like using them much back then. But for people who aren't used to handling fish that big, we used to bring them out, soft cotton, wet them just to grip them by the tail, because I'd had too many guests that accidentally dropped the fish, as it fought a little bit unexpectedly and clunked itself on the gunnels, or fell in the boat, or didn't get a chance. So it was just like I said, try to explain it a little bit preventative. But there's, just leaving it in the landing net nowadays is just turn it inside out and let it swim out.
Okay, well, let's get on to talking about equipment needed. You can see there's a photo of me. I think that's on Carrick, fishing a few years ago in a Super Cat. You got a lot of different choices about watercraft. I know people that go in there with float tubes. They go in there with pontoons, and of course, as I remember, some of the people from the Dakotas would come with float tubes. They were like the bigger Outcast models.
Yep.
And they had sonar, they had umbrellas, I think they had everything but a martini bar on the back of those things.
That was in my boat, the martini bar.
Okay. I think you had a heater next try. Trying to keep warm. But
Yep.
the key is you can come with different craft. Now, at one time there was somebody that was renting out boats, but there was limitations with that. One of the issues was that they would bring it to where you wanted to fish, drop it off, and unless you fish that place every day, if you wanted to go to another lake, you had to call them and they'd come pick it up and move it to the next lake. So, but that service is no longer available. So, a lot of people bring their own boats,
Yep.
like you do, and from the States. I personally don't. I usually use a float tube or a pontoon boat or whatever. I've got a whole bunch of different craft that I bring. But, the second bag, pack it down, put it in your second bag luggage with your flippers and your waders. It's not that tough.
No, you can, the beauty of these lakes is they're small, productive trout lakes. So you're not out there on on Lake Superior or anything like that. So they're ideally suited for float tubes, pontoon boats, kayaks, small boats. They're all electric motors only. So you can't, you just can't, you can have a motor on your back, but it's on the back of your boat, but it's got to be clearly inoperable. Typically we'll put a garbage bag over the prop and it's all just clearly it's up and out of the way. But the beauty, what you mentioned, Outcasts, they've got storage bags for their float tubes and pontoon boats. And I know their Stealth Pro, it's 37 pounds a boat. It's check baggage, right? And I've had guests come out with me and you got to pay a second baggage fee if you're going to fly out. But that's the beauty. It's so easy to get to and you can bring your stuff with you and taken care of. So you don't need a bass boat to fish out there.
No. Talking about the rods, the reels, and the fly lines is a whole subject in itself. We'll get to that in a second. But typically, I like to use a 6 or a 7 weight.
Yep.
Some people use a 5, but I find a 6 or 7. And I really like that 9.5, 10-foot length to give me, especially, different than you in the boat. But like when I'm down lower, that gives me a less chance of my back cast hitting the water.
Yeah.
And especially if you're throwing an indicator.
Yeah, you want your longer rods. I like longer rods in lakes in general, like minimum 9.5, preferably 10 foot. If you're using an indicator that doesn't move, doesn't release, you just get a longer set distance before the indicator jams up at the rod tip and you can't go any further. We use a lot of roll cast indicator fishing, so a longer rod is better for that. If we're anchored, we can steer and control fish that are getting around anchor ropes or other things off the boat. You just extend your arm and sweep it around. You could argue you get a longer cast because it's a longer lever. We like kind of moderate. I like moderate action rods with a forgiving tip for hook sets. And we use a lot of, some river and stream casts as well. And the long rod helps with reach casts and mends when we talked about the naked technique and indicator fishing earlier, because you don't want a big bow to form in your floating line. You want to stay tight to your fly and in contact so you can, react to it when you get a take. So, yeah, I'd say a 6 weight's a good average. And even a 7, if the wind comes up a bit, you can handle it a little bit better. A 5, you could certainly do it. But in some cases you might be a little underpowered, but it's up to you.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the 7, especially in the fall, you get those winds some days, and that 7's a blessing. You're trying to throw a rig out there.
Spring can be pretty boisterous too. When there's some really intense thunderstorms that roll through there. We were filming there one time. A thunderstorm rolled in. And the boat ramp, for those who are familiar with Patterson, looked like a river with the amount of water coming in. It was impressive. And half an hour later, it's gone. It's not a cloud in the sky kind of thing. So, yeah, there's some pretty impressive thunderstorms that roll through. And I remember one time on Twin, we actually saw a tornado, little conical, funnel cloud coming down, but it didn't stick.
Thank goodness, right?
Yes.
One thing I will say, large arbor reels, if you can have them, they're nice. I've got some older reels that aren't large arbor, and they're great functional reels. but I've had so many times, especially with rainbow trout specifically,
They like to
where
run.
I hooked them way over there and they came way over here like that. And
Yeah.
I'm stripping in, trying to get it on the reel, and they're big fish.
Yeah.
And one thing we got to emphasize to people, I showed some pictures. These fish, some of them are really big, and it doesn't even have to be length. It could be a 20-inch fish, but they're absolute buffaloes, and they've got so much energy because they've been feeding all summer, and there's so much food in these lakes, spring, summer, fall, and you got to manage them and get them on the reel quickly so you can fight them, right?
Yeah.
When we do the shows, we don't show the 3 to 8 minute battle for you to land a 26-inch brown. That's suddenly compressed into a minute and a half and netting it.
Yeah.
We can't make it fit on TV, right? So just so people understand that, a large arbor reel is real handy. Why don't we get into fly lines, Phil?
Okay.
Rio, Scientific Anglers,
Airflow.
there's a whole bunch of great companies out there that make lines that are specific to still water, but without getting into the real specific ones, because the hardcore guys, but if any of the people who are watching this, either now or later, they wanted to know what are the tools I need to bring? What would you tell them they need for flying?
In the fall months, I'd say to keep it compact and 2 lines, a floating line capable or suited for casting longer leaders and indicator rigs. So something with an aggressive front taper, oversized head. There are lines specifically designed out there by those companies you mentioned that'll cast that. You don't want your delicate presentation dry line. It'll struggle trying to cast an indicator rig and balance flies. And probably a clear intermediate, something that sinks in that 1.5 to 2 inch per second range. Because in the fall, you're going to be targeting the shallow waters, 10 feet or less. That's where all the fish are going to be. In the spring, you want the floating line again to fish indicators. You're going to be probably fishing a little deeper, because if you're fishing chironomids, you could be anywhere from 10 to 20 feet down, depending. Do that. You clear intermediate again for casting leeches and woolly buggers and minnows in and around the shallows. And then there is some of the lakes, when they're feeding on chironomids in that 20, 25 foot of water, is a technique we call dangling, where we fish a sinking line straight down below the rod tip and suspend the fly right off the bottom. And the takes to that method are addictive. You can do anything you want. There's no indicator to stare at or anything like that. Just do not let go of the rod, because they will rip it right out of the boat. You think you're fast, you're not that fast. So I would say something in a type 5 or type 7 line for that situations, and that type 5 line or a 7 would be good for stripping around attractors too, like boobies and fabs and things like that we fish at pace. But that's probably it. I'm a bit of a line junkie, so I carry way more than that. But those are probably the core lines you definitely don't want to leave home without.
I was going to put a picture in here of a photo I took in your boat a number of years ago when we were there fishing, and all the rods and reels you had strung. It was kind of like being in a bass boat in a tournament there, Phil. Not saying, but saying.
Yeah.
But now I want to add one line in there that you showed me that I'm really addicted to, especially in the fall. And Joe actually mentioned it, the little floating minnows that you can use in the fall. And it's basically a 10 to 15 foot intermediate line married to a floating line. They used to call it a ghost tip. Every company.
They got midge tips, emerger tips. Now I know Rio makes them in a hover tip as well. A hover line is another line I really like, but then we're starting to overdo the line.
That line, I use that for bass fishing. I use that for a number of different species, but for trout, especially in the fall, it's just perfect for that 0 depth to 4 to 6 feet.
Yeah, if you're anchored, it'll get to the bottom eventually. But when you're casting and stripping, that's what you want. You want a line in those shallow situations. It's obviously going to get you down a little bit, but not sink so fast that you're in the weeds all the time. Because you could be in the fall months, the weed growth's still up. You could be fishing into, it's 10 feet deep technically, but 5 feet of that depth is weeds, right? So you've only got 5 foot zone from the surface to the top of the weeds that you can work the fly. So something like that line you suggested, Colin, is a great choice for that.
So we're basically at the top of the hour, and so I lied. We're going to go longer.
I thought so.
haven't even finished.
I brought a
Yeah.
sleeping bag and a pillow, so I know I'm going to be here a while.
Tell your lovely wife I'm sorry. So why don't we answer some questions
Sure.
here that have been asked? People are asking about the status of the Parklands, and I did write to Peter and for Mike.
Mm.
You know, I think the key is, you know, like I said, there are some of the lakes that aren't doing as well as they traditionally have done. I know Patterson's been one, but I've got other people have told me that they're bouncing back. Again, I've got to do some homework myself, but I will go to the fact that lakes rotate as to which ones are hot. I mean, Josephine was a good one, and then it kind of had that kill the one winter, and it put the numbers down, but they've been restocking, and now it's coming back. They go through cycles.
Yeah, and they had, you know, the issue with Patterson was some perch and sucker infestations, and they just unfortunately the rainbows seem to suffer more in that scenario because they like their bugs. The browns will get more, you know, they like their minnows and things like that. They tend to be a little more resistant to it. But I know they were putting traps in there to try and see. The issue is when the water levels get up in a wet spring, all those lakes talk to each other, and different lakes around there don't all have trout in them. They have other species, and they get in there, and you know, they can wreak a little havoc. So hopefully, you know, like I say, I'm excited to go back and see because I know they've been trying to work hard in getting rid of some of those species out of there and getting the lakes back into balance.
Tom asks about whether or not you can keep fish to eat. Do you know about
I think on you know, I'm a cat. I'm like you. I'm a catch and release person, so to be honest, I don't like fish all that much. I do like sushi, but that's different. And fish and chips. But other than that, I believe on Patterson, I want to say you can keep a fish over 18 inches. One of them, but it couldn't be. And Twin, I know the Twin them. Sorry, the Tiger Trout Lake is catch and release. I think Tekerick, when it was going well, was because it was actually outside of the lakes. It was a lake that they had stocked, but it wasn't, you know, a flipper lake, we used to call it back then. And I think you could keep 5 fish out of that.
I think the key is it's just like the license. You got to check the latest regulations and see what they are. And then if you go to the provincial websites, they should have published it by now for this year. But have a look. And I see Peter's saying that you're allowed by regulations, but all taggers are catch and release. So I know there's some of them because there's ice fishermen that come in on some of those lakes and they keep a few fish. But again, check the rules.
Yeah, my concern, especially in the fall, would be some of them might be pretty muddy because when those lakes get into bloom, there's a chemical reaction that takes place along their lateral line and their fatty tissue, and that's what they taste like, dirt. So I just wouldn't want to, and that comes from fish, you know, stillwater fishing all over North America. Any of those shallow, muddy, murky kind of lakes, it's a muddy tasting fish that put you right off fish.
Yeah, no, you're right. And walleye have got the same issue sometimes. Somebody asked a question about can you use 2 flies, and the answer is yes.
And you should.
And then Mike asked a question about early spring fishing and the insect activity. Great question. And in fact, I know you really like the period of May and early June.
Yeah, the early spring fish. It's similar to, you know, other regions. You know, spring comes probably a little later there than other areas just because of the severity that is Canada's prairies in the winter. I can remember, you know, an American guest one time thought that the lakes by early June would be all in summer doldrums, which is when they get warm and you shouldn't fish them. And I'm like, they're just coming into shape. And I remember saying, you know, in Kamloops that day, it was like +3 centigrade and Russell was still -26. So, yeah, they come off a little later, but generally it's the, Mike's good to hear from you. It's, you know, chironomids are the spring thing. I used to plan for the great chironomid fishing was the first 2 weeks of June was pretty good.
Okay. Well, listen, we've answered most of the questions here, and I appreciate everyone being patient about that. Phil, I'm going to play some video, and this is little snippets. I think we probably shot 8 videos now since early 2000s in the Parklands, and I'll check that number. It could be that we're at 10. I don't know. I'll confirm it, but you know, the bottom line is for those that are watching, I would recommend if you go to our YouTube channel right now and look at the homepage and go down, you'll see a big, beautiful brown trout. That's actually a retro play that we just put up on Sunday for the show we did last time, which I think was 2018.
We also did the first episode, the Orvis Guide to Stillwater Trout Fishing. We filmed there.
Yeah,
Right?
that's true.
You were my cameraman.
I was your cameraman. I know. We will talk about that and how well that worked in the boat.
Yeah, because for everybody out there, Colin was distracted a lot and wanted to fish more than film sometimes. So.
And that's never a good formula, is it, Phil?
No, it's not. You do one or both. You can't do both.
That's right. Okay, well, just hang on. Everyone stay with us. We're going to put on some video. Here's some great scenes from the last few years of Phil. The best of Phil, I called it.
Oh, God. I haven't seen this. This ought to be fun. There we go, right at the boat. I was just about to consider raising the rod up to hang, just a slow rod raise to induce a take at the end of the retrieve. Wow, a millisecond before I thought to do it. I'm gonna just dog it down. It's a brown trout, I think. And oh yeah, it's a nice brown trout. So we're just using these balanced leeches with a floating line. I'm in about 6 feet of water, casting towards cattails along the shoreline. Fish at this time of the year, that's the supermarket. That's where the food are, and balanced flies are an excellent choice, especially cast and retrieve. Looks to be a female, nice fat female. Of course, the males at this time of the year are beautifully colored as well. She's got that balanced leech right in the snout. Balanced leeches, balanced minnows, balanced damsels, balanced scuds, all creatures of the shallows, and just the kind of fodder these beautiful fish are starting to feed up on. So I can probably just grab the leader here, take one last admiring look. Look at the colors on that fish. Wow. Parklands region of southwest Manitoba. Unbelievable public stillwater fisheries here all season long. Just a great place. And balanced flies are the way to go. Wow. I'm gonna keep doing that all afternoon, I think. Oh, we have a fish on. He wasn't even really looking at it. Whoa. Gotta get close. Oh, nice jump. Nice jump. What we call a hit and run. Wasn't really looking at it. All of a sudden, I was actually contemplating a fly change. And all of a sudden, boom, I just saw the line starting to move out. And he ate this on the go. Not sure what he ate. We're fishing a 2-fly rig here. Oh, he's not happy. And he is off and running. That side pressure into the rod. Fight him better. And at this point, I want to keep that fish while it's got lots of energy away from the boat. I've got 2 anchors down. I got long leader here. We're fishing 19 feet below indicator. From indicator to bottom fly, because we're over 22 feet of water. And we're fishing patterns typically at this depth. The muddy bottom bloodworm patterns are an excellent choice. Acronym pupa patterns, muddy bottoms, the prime chironomid habitat. Getting near. I always expect a final surge at the boat, and I'm sensitive. Once I bring a trout within the diameter of the rod, that he's tired and sort of steerable, so he doesn't suddenly bolt like that and end up in the anchor ropes or around a motor or any other obstruction. So you don't want to be too aggressive. You want to obviously tire the fish, but you don't want to be too aggressive to get him in. You could put a bad angle on your rod and cause a breakage, or you could wrap up around an anchor rope. I'll just steer him around if I can over this side. My boat's configured to fish out of the left port side, so I have most of my
equipment lying behind me so it doesn't get under my feet or in the way. And into the bag. Whew. What a beautiful fish, just silver bright. Just gonna reach in and take the fly out. Ate the upper fly, Chironomid pupa. Gonna get my glove. Again, put the glove on for the protection of the fish. I can get a good firm grip on his tail. If he flops around, could bang onto the gunnel. He could fall into the water in an unrevived state, or worse, accidentally fall into the boat, and that wouldn't be good for him. So what a magnificent fish. Look at that, like a chrome bumper. Just beautiful. Let's get him back in the water. So stick indicators are a great deep water tactic when fish are taking chironomids here in the parklands, but another favorite morsel on the agenda are forage fish. And if you want to catch a forage feeding trout, you need to work the margins, the edges. So we're working along here. Big browns and rainbows cruise along these areas. It's very shallow fishing. 4 or 5 feet under an indicator. They're in here chasing minnows around. So you just pick out likely looking spots. I always like points or opening weed. There's any rocks along the shoreline. You want to work those areas. Balanced flies are excellent for this. Either specific minnow patterns or brown olive colored leeches work well, because that is the actual natural coloration of the forage basin here. The brook sticklebacks, fathead minnows, those kind of things. So I actually have a dark leech pattern on. I call it bruise leech. It's a black and blue blend. And this looks to be a pretty healthy brown trout. There he goes. Whoa! Looks to be a big brown trout. He's still surging out in deep water. I don't want to horse him. We're using strong tippet here. Minimum 3X, 8-pound tippet. More often, 2X, 1X, and 0X is not unheard of. Oh, it's actually a big rainbow. This 6-weight is being taxed to the limit. When you come here, the minimum rod you want to bring is a 6-weight. You've got large fish, windy conditions at times, 6, even 7-weight sometimes. You don't want to show up in the Parklands region lightly armored for the battle. Oh, and that is a quality rainbow. Wow. Just gonna move him over to the other side of the boat here. Holy smokes. 1, 2, 3. Got the glove on, the fly's out. This fish has been sitting in the net, and I think it's ready to go, so we may only get a quick glimpse of this. Whoa, look at that thing. Look at that fish. Look at him. Wow. That's why you come to the Parklands, arguably one of the premier stillwater destinations in North America. Big browns, big rainbows, tigers, brookies. They got it all here. Wow.
Wow, that was exciting stuff. That was a lot of fill. I hope everyone enjoyed that, though.
Sorry, everyone. I apologize.
No. You know something? I'm like you. I watch that and I get juiced about going. I'm surrounded by snowbanks where I am right now, and it makes me want to be in Manitoba as soon as possible, fishing for those beautiful trout. So why don't we jump into what I think is important? Well, first, somebody's asking us if you fished. Calvin's asking us if you've ever fished Highway 10.
I haven't been up that far because the lakes around Russell area kept me busy, but I've heard some very good things, particularly about Barbie, for big brookies and rainbows up there, and some other lakes. And I believe there's another tiger trout lake on the way up there past Twin, on the way up towards Swan River and Dauphin. So
yeah, and
that's an area we'll go there. Let's go there, Colin. Let's go.
Well, that could be a 2-part show, right? Parklands and then going up into the Ducks and some of the other areas, right?
we're in the neighborhood. It would only make sense.
So let's talk about what's it going to cost. This is Carrick, and those are two of my friends from here in Ottawa. And as you can see, Jan's fighting a nice fish he caught literally from the dock. It's a nice brown trout. And some people, they can drive. I mean, you're driving from Alberta. I know people come from BC. Some people come from Western Quebec and Ontario.
North Dakota.
Yeah, Dakotas, Nebraska, Montana. A lot of people make that pilgrimage. It's probably a day's drive, like 10 to 12 hours. Yeah. But again, well worth it. There's tons of motels in the area that are very affordable, especially if you're going two to a room, like I tend to do with a friend. And there's places in Parkland, etc. You can tent it. You can bring an RV. You can bring a camper. There's lots of options. I don't know if there's any guides in the area per se, but
I don't recall any. I know there used to be, but as you said, that with unfortunate impacts of the pandemic, not so much anymore. But you don't, there's enough references online to obviously watch the shows we've done. It's a very DIY friendly neighborhood there to do it yourself.
And I think that's the thing I want everybody to know. So what I typically do is we fly up from where we live here in Ontario to Winnipeg, and then we rent a vehicle. And typically we'll get a minivan or a pickup truck because we throw our float tubes into the back of the truck or in the back of the minivan. So I typically bring some clothes, one bag, and stuff like that. And the other bag, I bring my float tube, my waders, my boots, my fins. And one thing I want to mention right here, because there's two items I saw when we were watching you that I thought of. One is bring a lunch bag. Because you had the igloo cooler there, which is nice when you can drive. But I have learned, I get those folding packs, or you get the ones that Yeti makes, etc. Bring those. They're fantastic. You put a couple ice packs in them. And I saw you, like, there's that Subway right there in Russell. I think there's one in Roblin now. We pick up food for the day. We'll have breakfast. And that's great about the fall. It's like gentlemen's hours, right? You get up, and get in the water at crack of dawn. You can go. The same even in the spring. Like
no, it's generally 9 to 5 is great time. So
it's reasonable hours. So bring a lunch bag, and the other one is a net, long-handled net, and don't make the mistake I've seen some people of bringing ones that don't float.
No, or too small.
That would be so. When you hook that big 26-inch rainbow, and it's not fitting in the net, and you got a head and a tail sticking out. That's Is there any other recommendations you tell people to bring, whether they're floating or driving?
Make sure you bring your rain gear. Obviously there is a chance of hitting rain, but it also, if the wind comes up, it'll just block the wind and help keep you warm in the fall months. Hand warmers and cold, appropriate, as we say in Canada, toques or wool hats would be in order. I'm trying to think what else. Obviously all the gear we talked about. I think that's it. A good, like you mentioned, the net, ample size in a wooden net because it floats, and it's nice because you can manage the fish, lay the net in the boat beside you or in your float tube or pontoon boat, and just got both hands to manage the fish. You're not stuck in two minds trying to, save your net and manage a fish, and usually you lose the net and the fish. So, yeah.
And I love when you were screaming there, grabbing your rod, because you personified what you said earlier about don't put your indicator out there and leave your rod unattended for a second while you decide to look in your tackle box. Because
one of my most memorable. Well, I've had a friend on Patterson while we were doing that dangling method, heard a horrible splash and just, that's my rod. And fortunately, this fish, his rod got launched overboard. He can see it sinking, but it's just out of arm's reach, and it's sinking down. And that fish decided to come up and jump behind him in the boat like this, which pulled the rod tip up, or pulled the rod up, and my friend who was with him was able to get his rod underneath and grab it and save it. So it was good for my friend who got his rod back. It was good for Bob because he got a bottle of scotch out of it too. So
as he should on a big save like that. And Patterson claimed a few rods at its stake.
Yeah, and I remember one time on Tekerick fishing indicators, but I was messing around with a new technique, fishing a hover line and a chironomid, just casting it out as far as I can and creeping it back. And he caught a fish, so I just left my rod lying in the side of the boat, and I heard this horrible thump, and something had eaten my flies as they were just sinking down out there. And the only thing that stopped the rod from getting yanked right out of the boat was the reel hit the gunnel like this, bam. Right, and that stopped it, and that gave me enough time to grab it, or I would have had an expensive lesson on my hands. So yeah, you want to when you've got your lines out, and somebody else is with you in a boat and reeling a fish, you might want to pull your gear in because it could be an expensive life lesson.
So I want to wrap this up, Phil. With I want to tell people about how, like, this fishery, I still think it's basically one of the best kept secrets in North America for lake fishing for trophy trout. I've been down to Patagonia a number of times, and I know you go down to Jurassic Lake. And the thing is, I fish the lakes down there in Chile, and they're really fantastic. But the trout are no bigger or not more plentiful than they are in the Parklands.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you something: for the price you pay to stay at a local motel, buy your food, fly there, rent a vehicle, split it with a friend, you can't get a deal like this and have the fish you get is available in the Parklands.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know any place.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, the Henry's Lake, but there's not one where there's a daisy chain of lakes like we have there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say the fish are probably arguably they're larger in Jurassic, but it's a haul to get there. Whereas you can
a little bit of coin.
A little bit.
Well, and reasonably too. But the bottom line is, it's a great.
But it's like you said, it's affordable, accessible. All kinds of manner of watercraft they're small enough. You don't have to worry about that. You can camp. You can stay in a hotel. There's probably Airbnbs out there right now. You can sleep in a gravel parking lot. You can do.
I had to bring that up, but you're right. Actually, I knew somebody that told me they rented a cottage.
Yeah.
And
we were in a house one year.
We were in a house in Tekerick that they told me.
Yeah, down in some of these little. So there's lots of, and it's easy to get to for, you just fly into either Winnipeg. I know sometimes Saskatoon. You can fly, you rent a car, and 3 or 4 hour drive, and you're there.
Yeah.
And it's good driving. It's not 4-wheel drive or anything like that. It's very easy to get to.
Oh, Clint agrees with us. Thanks, Clint. I appreciate it. It really is, and it's just not in Canada. I mean, you travel a lot more than I do in the States, to where there's great stillwater fisheries. It's a unique fishery. There's not many places like this that I know of, and I think that's what drew both of us there in the early 2000s when we found out about it. I mean, don't get me wrong, Kamloops, BC, parts of BC, they got some great fisheries, good areas too. But this is one that, I mean, it's just, they've done so much work here. Somebody's asking about Flipper, and that's FLPPR.
Yeah, was it some Foundation for the Lakeland Improvement of the Parkland region?
I think it was something like that.
Yeah.
That website is still up. If you go look up that website, it's got a ton of information in it. I don't know who's maintained it anymore. Again, we're going to do a little discovery in making the show and research and find out more of the resources that are available to anglers getting ready to go there. And that's why I want to show both ways. You're driving there, bringing the boat, and I'm going to be the guy coming by plane with my float tube in my bag and show two different ways to fish and how we both enjoy the same fishery and the same fishing for trophy trout. And I'll probably kick your butt.
Sure, bring it on.
Okay, no, you didn't even flinch. Come on.
Hey, it's not up to me or you. It's up to Mother Nature. So,
well, you do have a little edge on me, buddy, just a little. But, anyways, Phil, thank you very much for coming on the show and helping us to talk about this. I'm really excited about going to the Parklands with you this September and putting together a new show. I'll find out what number it is. It might be 9 or 10. I don't know. We've done a lot of them over the last 15, 16 years, but everybody likes them. So if you haven't seen them, guys, go to our YouTube channel, The New Fly Fisher, and have a look in there. If you put in Parklands, you'll see all the videos we've done. Phil, you should tell people about your YouTube channel, which I use all the time for my fly tying.
Yeah. Thanks, Colin. Yeah, I've got my own YouTube channel, with some vlogs on there, and I've got to get the playlist up for the new fly fisher. I know I promised to do that, but lots of fly tying videos as well, all predominantly stillwater focused. And frankly, I think just about every pattern we showed of all the fly patterns, there's on-camera video tying instructions for them there. So, great resource if you want to go and stillwater fishing in general, but particularly in the Parklands region.
Calvin just commented the Swan Valley Sport Fishing Enhancement website.
Yeah.
Also a great resource. So what I plan to do when we actually make the show and all that, in our website, if you look under destinations, we're going to create a Parklands one. I know I've got a little bit in there, but I'm going to update it, put new links, photos, everything, so people can help. It'll help you to find where to go and where the resources are, the towns, the lakes, everything. But there's so much information about this area. It's better if I just link it, but I'll do something like that. And there's a good resource right there, the parklandtourism.com fly fishing. And they have links in there. There's a lot of resources out there.
Yeah.
Again, Phil, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thanks, Colin.
I knew it was going to go late. It always does when I get a rock star like you on here. And we can talk about hockey, for everyone that was watching. But thanks again for coming on. And for everyone that's watching, thank you for joining us. And hopefully you'll get time to make the Parklands in Manitoba a destination you get to fish at in this coming year or the years to come. Thanks for watching. Take care.
Take care, everyone.